Hello everyone, my name is Colleen and this is going to be a really quick recipe today. It goes really quick once you've made it a few times anyway, and it's delicious. I made it once on a video with a soup recipe, but I felt like it kind of got pushed to the background because it was near the end. And I think it's just such a good recipe that it deserved its own video, even if it was a short one. So I think I've just about got everything ready. I'm just going to turn my oven up to 415 degrees and I will be right back to show you how it all comes together. So this recipe is one that I've made many times. I am the kind of person who, if I have a recipe for something, I'll always go back and look at it because, you know, it's easy to forget something. So I've kind of got everything all lined up here. This is a buttermilk biscuit recipe. And this recipe has never failed me, not one single time. So I'm going to get started because it goes pretty quick. And I'm sure that you would enjoy it if you gave it a try. So we need to start off with 2 cups of just regular white flour, and you notice that I did cut the tops off. I do that with this recipe because I made it once and it worked out exactly as, you know, a baker's recipe should work out, so I've followed that ever since. Oops, new can of baking powder. So 1 tablespoon of baking powder goes into this. Level up. Not quite all the dry ingredients, but close. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt, which I'm going to measure to the side because I always seem to overflow, as you can see. And that's done. Now, next we're going to start with our wet ingredients, starting with the butter. We need 3/4 of a cup of butter. Now, you do not have to have the butter cold for this recipe. Room temperature butter is just fine. I know that lots of recipes call for ice cold, but you do not need it in this recipe. I'm going to pack it in there pretty good. Make sure I've got the true amount. And then I'm going to pop it into the bowl, or in this case my largest measuring cup, because this is how I've always made it. I'm going to grab a pastry cutter, but you could use 2 knives to cut the butter in. And you want it to be, you know, maybe pea-sized or smaller. That part's important. You don't want to have big clumpy bits in it. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be super small either. We have this recipe with soup and stew, and wow, we have this recipe honestly just in the bottom of a bowl with some peaches over the top of it. We have this recipe, just pop the cold biscuits into the microwave for about 10 seconds and then add a little butter and some homemade jam. It's very versatile. And I also sometimes make this in double batches or triple batches, and no, that's not true. I will make 3 or 4 batches because sometimes doubling or tripling a recipe isn't good for the recipe. So then I will put them on a sheet tray. I'll pop them into the freezer. I will freeze them for, well, till they're good and hard. And then I take them out and I put them all in a bag. And then when we want a biscuit, we just open up the bag, and put however many we want on a small plate and pop them into the microwave and microwave them until they're warm through, which takes maybe 25 seconds, maybe not that long. So test that for yourself. But they come out of the freezer after they've been microwaved and warmed up. They're just like they came out of the oven, which is, you know, another really good thing about the recipe. Not all recipes heat well. So this is 2.5 tablespoons of honey going in. And I like honey in this recipe. It just adds a different level of flavor to it. And last but not least, this recipe calls for the buttermilk. I have this 3.25% milk fat Dairyland buttermilk, old-fashioned. But if you didn't want to buy a whole quart of buttermilk to make one batch of cookies, you could take just under 3/4 of a cup of regular milk and add a teaspoon of lemon juice to it and let it set about 10 minutes, and it will give you the same effect, so that you don't have to go out and buy buttermilk, especially for this recipe. I use buttermilk in a number of different ways, so I usually have it in the fridge, but not everybody has. So I'm just going to use my knife, no fancy tools here. I'm just going to give this a really good stir so that the little bits of honey get mixed in with everything else. And I would say we're there, because we don't handle this dough very much once the buttermilk goes in. There we go. In goes the buttermilk. And using that same knife, I'm just going to bring it all together. This dough can be a bit wet, but when you see in your bowl you don't see a whole lot of dry powder in it anymore, that is going to tell you you're ready. Just like my oven just dinged to tell me it was ready. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of flour out on my board. Move a couple of these things out of the way. There we go. Real time. And I'm just going to roll this out. Kerplunk. And I'll move that out of the way too, so you can see what I'm doing. So, I'm just going to move the camera so you can see this action. It should give you a little better view, I think. So I'm just bringing it all together. I'm not going to muck with it a whole lot. I just give it a couple squishes. Make sure that I've got the bulk of it. This feels a little dry today, which is weird because the humidity is a lot higher today with all the rain we've had. So I'm just going to continue to flatten and turn, and flatten and turn. I hope you don't mind rough edges on your biscuits. And when I reach about the 1 inch mark, maybe a little more than an inch, I'll stop. And I don't have a fancy biscuit cutter, so I have a glass that I use. This is just a water glass. It's kind of narrow on the top, because usually we don't want the biscuits really big. I'm just flouring it out of my flour container, and I'm going to cut these biscuits. This, I've had so many compliments on this recipe, and it is something that's easy to make. Doesn't often fail I've never had it fail, but it doesn't fail if you follow the recipe exactly as I've shown you, and you'll look like a rock star when you serve these to your family and friends. Anybody that thought you couldn't bake is going to have a different idea about that now. Over here I've just got a round cake pan because I found this works best for me out of the containers that I have to put in the oven. And I'm just going to lightly spray it. This is pan baking spray, but any kind of baking spray would work. And I'm going to just put these biscuits into the pan. They will touch in this pan, which is okay, because the interesting thing about these biscuits is that they use each other for support as they rise up. So it's not a bad thing that they're touching. Now, I've just mushed the bits together and I've made what appears to be a biscuit. And I've got enough little bits left to do one more, although I don't really have room in the pan for it. So I'm going to have to do a little moving around, which is always the case in this pan. Mush it. Don't really want to roll it or do anything like that to it, so I'm just going to shape it best I can for the spot in the pan. So this is what they look like as I get them jammed in there. Now, some people may put a little butter on them at this time. I don't like to add any more butter to it. Some people also sugar them if you're going to use them for like a shortcake recipe or something like that. But I'm going to pop them directly into the oven, which is preheated to 415 degrees. And I will show you the finished result in 12 minutes when they come out of the oven. Oh, this is a good one. Well, here they are, folks. Nice and just lightly golden brown. Took 12 minutes. Just going to pull one out. I've got a couple eggs I fried up for myself here that I'm going to have my biscuit with. Just going to reach in and grab this guy right here. I'm going to split him with my fork. I should have cut him with my knife because he's still very hot. And I'm just going to add a little sliver of butter to each half. And this is, ooh, it's still pretty warm, but this is what they look like. They're nice and fluffy, and they will never let you down. I hope that you give them a try. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it, consider sharing it with your friends, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.